Welcome to A View to a Grill. I'm Johnny. Today we're going to do some fall off the bone baby back ribs on the Weber kettle. I'm going to start everything off with a little bit of baby back rib prep. Today I'm going to try to keep a timeline of everything I do, and we started at 8:30 in the morning. We'll just cut the baby back rib packaging open. I like to start off by patting the meat side dry with the paper towel just for easy cleanup. Next, we'll get them out of the package and just inspect our ribs. There's a little bit of cleanup that we're going to have to do. Once we have them out, we'll pat the bone side dry as well. And I also want to say that if you're going to invest 6, 7, 8 hours into smoking these baby back ribs, take 34 seconds and get that silver skin off the bones. These baby back ribs don't need a lot of trimming. All we're going to do is clean up some of this loose flesh and just a little bit of the fat. Also, take a look at this. When you set these on the grill, you don't want them to be all stretched out like this. You want some nice meaty bites, and to get that, all you have to do is compress those ribs just to make them all perky. Now let's season those ribs. I like to season the bone side first because I'm going to cook these meat side up. I'm going to use my own sweet rub mixture for these ribs, and I'll have all the ratios down below in the description. So I'll get all of the edges seasoned, then I'll season all the way down the bone side of the ribs. Now I'll just flip these over meat side up on a baker's grid. And remember, everything you see in the video, I'll have a link to that product in the description. Once I have them on that baker's grid, I'll get the meat side seasoned. And there we have it all set up on our rack. The meat is nice and perky. Everything is well seasoned. Now I'll just let these hang out on the counter and let that seasoning sweat in while I get the Weber kettle set up. Now it's 9 a.m. and I will get my fire starters started. Now take a look in my chimney starter. It's only about a quarter full with all the coals stacked to one side. Now once that is going, that's going to give me enough time to finish setting up the Weber kettle. Today I'll be using a slow and sear with the water trough. I'll be packing the slow and sear up with as much lump charcoal as I can and 3 or 4 oak wood chunks. At the top of the slow and sear, I'll leave just a little bit of space for my lit charcoal. Well, now what I found that has worked for me lately is that some of the larger lump charcoal, I'll just move that out of the side. I want the smaller pieces of lump because I find that works better in my slow and sear. And now at 9:15, our lump charcoal is ready to go. I'll get that lit charcoal into the space that we reserved earlier. And now I'll fill in the water trough with some tap hot water. Now I'll just close my grate. And look at that, it is heaping with lump charcoal because I really don't want to have to add fuel later. Also, at this time, I'll set up my ThermalWorks Signals ambient temperature probe. It is now 9:30 and I'm going to close the lid and bring the Weber kettle up to temp. Our target temperature range is going to be between 270 degrees and 290 degrees. We're starting off with both the bottom vent and the top vent wide open. We'll get the ThermalWorks Signals turned on, and then once we reach an ambient temperature of 220 degrees, it's time for our first vent adjustment. I'll just close the bottom vent to the third oval from the left, and the top vent, we're going to leave that wide open. Then at 250 degrees, I'll make my second vent adjustment. I'll move the bottom vent over to the second oval from the left, and the top vent, we're going to leave that one wide open. And then at around 260 degrees, I'll make my third vent adjustment. And all that's going to be is we're going to close the top vent by half. And now we're in our target range. It is now 10 a.m. and it's time to get the ribs on. Now to get the ribs on, I'm going to have to move my ambient temperature probe. So I'll get that out of the way. And now that that's out of the way, I can put my baby back ribs on the indirect side of the grill. And now I can put my ambient temperature probe back on the grill. Now we can just get the lid closed and let them go for about 2 hours. Now I'm just going to take a few seconds to show you why you need the ambient temperature probe for this setup. If you take a look at the ThermalWorks Signals thermometer, it says that the grate level temperature is 278 degrees, but the lid thermometer a little over 400 degrees. That's a huge difference. And if you want to know what the temperature is where you're actually cooking your protein, that's why you need an aftermarket thermometer. And now it is time to spritz our ribs. It is now 12 o'clock noon, and our ribs have been in the Weber kettle undisturbed for 2 hours. Today, I'm going to be using my favorite for now, spritzing liquid, and all that is dill pickle juice. First, we're gonna have to take a look at our ribs. The color is nice and the bark is set. Now we'll just spritz, making sure we get even coverage over the entire Babyback rib surface. We'll also check for doneness, and at this point, I'm specifically looking for bone pullback, and there is none on either side of the ribs. So we'll get that put back on our baker's grid and close the lid, and take a look at this. That took a grand total of 2 minutes. You want to be in and out as fast as you can, because the longer that lid stays open, the more your fire is going to go out of control. And now an hour later, it is 1 p.m. 3 hours of cooking time so far. We'll get the lid open and we're gonna look for some more visual cues that can tell us how far along we are with this rib cook. And right on top, you can see some cracks starting to form in the meat of the Babyback ribs. When I lift it up from the middle, you can see that those cracks or crevices are spreading out just a little bit. And then when I pick it up from the end, you can see a little tear starting to form on the top of the ribs. Now when we take a look from the side of the ribs, you can see about a 33% bend, which is also a good indication, you know, by my estimation, 65% done, maybe. So now we'll go ahead and get these ribs spritzed and close the lid, because we're going to let these go for another hour. Now I had the lid open longer this time than I did the first time. That really fed the fire a lot of oxygen, so the temperature jumped up. I'm going to go ahead and make some vent adjustments to get the temperature back down. I'll just close the top vent just a little bit and then close the bottom vent just a little bit as well. Now, while those ribs are going on in the Weber kettle, we're going to set up our wrapping station and go over our glazing ingredients. Now for the glaze, or maybe it's better to say all the ingredients that we need for the wrapped portion of the cook, maybe that's better. Nonetheless, here's what you're going to need. We're going to need some of that rub that we made earlier, some brown sugar, a sweet barbecue sauce, 1 stick of butter, and I also like to use some honey. And now an hour later, it's 2 o'clock and it's time to wrap the ribs. I'm also going to close the lid because I don't want my fire to get out of control. Now, in no particular order, the first thing I'm going to do is put down all of those pats of butter. Next, I'll get some of that dry rub and just spread it out evenly on top. After that, I'll just take a couple of handfuls of the brown sugar and spread that out evenly as well. After that comes a generous layer of honey. And last, I'll get some of that sweet barbecue sauce and just pour that right down the center. Now we have our foil seasoned, and all we have to do is get the ribs and place those on top of all that seasoning, meat side down. And then I'll go through that entire process again on the bone side, because the bone side needs love too. Now that I have the ribs seasoned, it's time to wrap the ribs. And we want to do this in such a way so that we can easily unwrap it when it's time. Now we'll get the wrapped Babyback ribs on for about an hour. After an hour, it's time to boat your Babyback ribs. It's now 3 p.m. and I'm taking the ribs off and just setting them on my Weber kettle table. We're going to expose these ribs and then take a look as to how far along we are with the cook. Because at this time, it's decision time, right? Either these ribs are close enough to be boated now, or they need to be rewrapped and put back on the grill. So let's take a look at the ribs and check out these bones. There's so much bone pullback that honestly, that alone has told me that these ribs are far enough along. Let me show you another way if you just want to double check yourself. Grab a hold of one of those exposed bones and kind of twist it. If it feels like it's about to tear loose, then you know your ribs have been wrapped long enough. If it doesn't feel like it's about to tear loose and it still feels extremely tight and there's no movement, then that means you're gonna have to wrap them, get them back on the grill. Today, 1 hour was long enough, and it's time to boat these ribs. All I'm going to do is roll in the foil all the way around the ribs until the sides of the foil is high enough to keep the juices in, but low enough to expose the top of the ribs. Now I'll get the lid closed, and we're going to let these go for about 30 minutes. The whole purpose of this part of the cook is to dry off some of that moisture on the top side of the ribs. And then about 30 minutes later, it's time to sauce the ribs. And we're going to sauce these ribs 3 times every 15 minutes. It's now 3:30. Now let's get the lid off. We'll get our sweet barbecue sauce and pour some on all the way across the ribs. And then we're just going to take our brush and brush it out. Make it a nice, even coating. Once you're done, close the lid. Let that sauce set up. And then at 3:45, 15 minutes later, it's time to sauce our ribs again. We're gonna go through that whole process again. We'll pour on some of that sweet barbecue sauce, brush it out for an even layer of sweet barbecue sauce. Then we're gonna close the lid and let it go for another 15 minutes. Now it is 4 p.m., 15 minutes later, and we're gonna go through the whole routine again. We're gonna get our sauce on. We're gonna brush that sauce out for even coverage, and we're gonna put the lid on. Only difference is, for that last time, I'm giving it 30 minutes because I want that sauce to set up as well as possible. It's now 4:30, and you can see we have a lot of time invested in these ribs, and it's gonna be well worth it. These are not, whatever that is, 3-2-1 ribs. Don't believe the hype on 3-2-1 ribs. You wanna cook your ribs for as long as they need to, but you don't want to overcook them. These ribs are going to fall off the bone, but they're still going to have a little bit of texture. They're not going to be mushy, overcooked ribs. Now let's get these ribs off, and I'm using my favorite barbecue accessories, 45-degree pliers, link in the description. Once you have them off, get them over to your cutting board. We're going to let these rest for about 30 minutes. I'm going to set up a foil tent over the ribs, and I'm going to try not to lay the foil on the barbecue sauce because we really worked hard to get that glaze to look perfect, and you want it to look perfect when you decide to serve these to your guests. So be proud of your cook and make it look good. It's now 5 o'clock. We let everything cool down. The sauce is set, and let's taste these ribs. We get these on the board. Just look at that bend right before I put them down. Now I get that center one cut off, and since we made these ribs all perky when we set them on the grill, look at that meat cap, the perfect meat cap to take a bite out of. Now you know your ribs are fall off the bone when you can just grab a piece and tear it right off. Now I will say that these ribs are totally delicious. Every once in a while, I like a sticky, fall off the bone babyback rib. Now, when I hold these babyback ribs upside down, you can see that the sauce has set so well, there is no drippage. And that's because we let them set up for 30 minutes. And then, even just as important, we let them rest for 30 minutes. And today, I just couldn't stop eating these ribs. That's how good they were. I think I ate 3 of them just standing there. Now, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead, take a second or two and do that now. Thank you for watching A View to a Grill. I'll see you guys next time. Take care, y'all.